picking back up where I just stopped the last video, make sure you read up on the section about fetal alcohol syndrome disorders and fetal alcohol spectrum disorders and fetal alcohol syndrome, of course. This is really, really, really important when you are providing any psychoed or speaking with clients who may be concerned about their use, or when you're working with clients who may have fetal alcohol syndrome. And so there's some clear markers here on page 322. It talks about the effects of and the symptoms that are associated with fetal alcohol syndrome. And so it would not be uncommon for you to have a client who say, their mother drank while she was pregnant with them, and now you're you are working with children, a child who has neurological problems or intellectual disabilities as a result of, their mother consuming alcohol while pregnant. And there's this interesting, I don't think they have it in here, but there's some images. No, I don't think so. No. Yep. So these images are quite interesting. I feel terrible that they used an image of this little tiny girl who looks so sweet. But the images of the rat images here, B, not A, but B, is images of rats or fetal mice, and you can kind of really see the differences in the shape of their head and their eyes, and certainly the mouth and nose area. And I find this to be interesting, but in a very heartbreaking and very, very, very sad way. Let's see, I'm going to go on here. There is hope here, though. I'm sorry, I do want to make sure I mention this. There is hope. The earlier the intervention, behavioral interventions, and possibly medication that these children receive, the better the outcome. I want to jump to. I'm sorry, I keep coming back to drinking while pregnant and whatnot, and you'll notice that it is stated in this book that it is recommended that you don't drink at all during pregnancy. I know that that's seemingly a little different than what you hear. Oh, well, it's okay for you to have one glass of wine, or it's okay for you to have one beer. And unfortunately, while that might be the thought or a suggestion, this class is all about physiology and the effects of use on such a more detailed scale that we can't say for certain that it is in fact okay, even in small amounts. So people are certainly free to make the choices that they make and based off of the information that they have. But what we know from this perspective is that, and your book says on 323, the safest option at this time is abstinence during pregnancy. All right, I am going to jump to, you can see that alcohol, in addition to affecting all of the organs or almost all of the organs, it acts on multiple neurotransmitters. So those neurotransmitters the neurotransmitters that we've been speaking about previously all are affected by alcohol. So it's interesting that we have, alcohol is legal and even socially accepted and encouraged. It really does big major damages to many, many aspects of our body and our physical self, our emotional self. It's pretty serious stuff, and it's interesting how we view it as being okay when in reality it's far from okay. Okay, so specifically glutamate, dopamine, GABA, of course, and then the opioid system. And what's interesting about that is what we're finding is and we'll talk about this in a second, but some of the medication used for opiate use disorder is also really helpful for alcohol use disorder as well. See, and there's a couple of different ways that medication can, let's see, kind of past that, but I think they included it in all of these different neurotransmitters. But there's a couple of ways that medication can aid in treating alcohol use disorders. And one way is to just address the cravings. So medication that is specific to target cravings. And then there's medication that is aversion. So like you were talking about that in, let's see, what page was that on? Sorry, I skipped it. I was going to try and find this specific page for you. But your book specifically mentions, oh my goodness, where is this? More toward the back. Uh, 343. So when we start talking about antabuse or disulfiram, this makes it very, very, very unpleasant when you drink. And as a matter of fact, you immediately start feeling sick. You want to vomit. You maybe do vomit, but it's supposed to make alcohol really, really, really not enjoyable and not pleasant, and actually really create an aversion to it. And then you have drugs like Camprol, and this kind of addresses the unpleasant feelings with drinking. So again, it works. It helps to lessen the unpleasantness that is associated with drinking, and helps to sustain abstinence because you don't have that negative feeling, negative effects associated with stopping drinking or the hangovers. And then there's some promising new drugs that are specifically targeting stress. There's a connection between stress and drinking, and stress and drinking more. And so there's actively in the works people trying to work on drugs that address that, and those are not here in the United States yet, but they are getting there. And then, like I mentioned before, drugs that work for opiate use disorder. And again, I'm trying to flip through here and find the page that this is on. Sorry, I think it starts talking about it on, 332 and 333 starts talking about its effects on the opioid system. And then when you go to page 343, it starts talking about naltrexone and how it addresses the cravings and certainly can improve longer periods of abstinence because it addresses those cravings, and that it seems to work a little bit better on folks with a familial history of alcohol use disorder. So that's really all I want to touch on right now. Make sure you look in of course, read the section on alcohol use disorder in the DSM and know what it looks like from that perspective, from a diagnostic perspective. Okay, that's it.